Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering to discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. As I said right before we started recording, got a little bit of a tickle in my throat, so hopefully I won't be coughing too much as we go, but we'll see. So today's episode is going to be effectively a Pixar Shorts Part 1 episode. We're going to be looking at the first 6 what are like official Pixar shorts, which are The Adventures of Andre and Wally B, Luxo Jr., Red's Dream, Tin Toy, Knick Knack, and probably the first one that either of us ever actually really saw, Geri's Game. Because Geri's Game, as we will touch on, is the first one that came out after Toy Story. Everything else was like pre-Pixar shooting to fame. So I'll throw it to you, Logan, because you were the one that kind of jumped on wanting to do Pixar shorts. And originally you were like, yeah, let's just do the first 3. And I was like, the first 3 is less than 8 minutes of content to
Right.
watch and discuss. So let's add a few more into the mix to at least try and like flesh this out a little bit. But was this kind of just bouncing off of our conversation with Lightyear last week of like, hey, let's look back at early Pixar stuff?
We've talked about it before too. I think maybe when we did Luca and Turning Red, we had like delved into like some of the Pixar short stuff then, and so it'd been on my mind for I guess a couple of months actually. I think we're each 2 people who really like Pixar. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
2 people who do a Disney themed podcast, but I think the shorts in particular are fun because it is just like a shot of adrenaline of Pixar. You get in this like 5-minute at the most kind of story is like everything Pixar does in terms of its emotional like depth it can plume and like the sense of humor and the like visual style. And especially these early ones, I talked a little bit about it off mic. Like it's cool to kind of get stuff that is Pixar before Pixar existed in one of the cases, but even just like Pixar before anyone really knew of it, obviously pre Toy Story for all but one of these shorts. So I think it's a like fun way to do a Pixar episode and also a fun way to kind of do a history lesson as well.
Yeah, this was definitely an interesting one to put the doc together for, because it was like, well, I don't have a cast to really like draw from. And yeah, like total across all of these episodes, I think that's less than 25 minutes of stuff.
Yeah, probably.
Like end to end. So it's like, well, okay, so it was a lot of like deep dive into little factoids and trivia bits about Pixar that I didn't know. And like some of these, I don't know if I'd ever really watched The Adventures of Andre and Wally B or Red's Dream before. I certainly didn't have like concrete memories of either of them.
Right.
So like some of these are like, if I watched them, it was probably like I watched it once on the Pixar shorts DVD that we bought my dad for Christmas one year or something like that.
Right.
Because yeah, as you were touching on, like these are just kind of fun little like one hits of Pixar stuff. And as you were describing that, I was like, Pixar feature films are like the big AAA thing, and these are the indie games that basically just get to like focus on one particular thing and try and do that one thing really, really, really well.
Right.
These early ones especially are like, oh, they show their age in the world of computer animation, but it's still like, if you put yourself at that point in time, like the one of these predates me, so it's wild to think that like it is
that's a really
that they've been doing animation for that long.
All of these, but the last one predate me, actually, don't they?
Yeah.
The Knick Knack is 89.
Yep. So yeah, the history lesson
really
here.
Weird to think.
The Adventures of Andre and Wally B was originally released. So it's fun because like through these you go through like Wikipedia, and there's actually an like the date I'm putting in here is August 17th, 1984, because according to Wikipedia, that is the date where it premiered as a completed thing. It debuted a few months earlier, and I think I'll touch on this in trivia,
You will.
at a conference, basically, with like a handful of incomplete frames. So it wasn't like and they just kind of had animatics in place of those frames or something like that. So like the 1984 August 17th, which is right around the corner, anniversary of that here, was the like its completed version of it. Luxo Jr. was up next, and that was August 17th, 1986.
Maybe the most famous of certainly I think the most influential in terms of its enduring.
I mean,
Luxo
yeah,
Jr.
the fact that Luxo Jr. is the like
and the
Pixar
ball,
logo.
too.
Yeah, I would say of these like pre Toy Story ones, like Luxo Jr. and Tin Toy are probably the most iconic. Tin Toy in particular, because like it was the one that really like laid the groundwork for let's do a feature film based on toys.
Yeah.
So yeah, Luxo Jr. there, August 17th, 1986. Red's Dream, July 10th, 1987. Tin Toy, August 2nd, 1988. Knick Knack, September 1st, 1989. And then they started working on this big old project called Toy Story. And so they did not return to shorts until Geri's Game, which debuted technically I think it had an earlier premiere at a showcase, but the debut that I'm counting here was November 24th, 1997, alongside A Bug's Life. Each of these has a runtime of between 2-ish and 5 minutes. So yeah, just they put the short in shorts. In the Pixar shorts timeline of things, those were the first 6. Then following Geri's Game, you have For the Birds that came out in November 2001 alongside Monsters, Inc. Bounden that came out in November 2004 alongside The Incredibles. And One Man Band that came out in 2006 alongside Cars. A limited roll call here because it is no starring, so we just kind of have writer-directors for each of these. And it's basically 3 across the 6 that we're talking about here. Up first with Andre and Wally B. That was written and directed by Alvy Ray Smith, who was basically a computer animation person for episodes of the 1980s Carl Sagan-led Cosmos series. He also worked at ILM on computer graphics for Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and then he would go on to be a co-founder of Pixar in 1986 when it spun out of Lucasfilm and became Pixar as a standalone company. And he was only there for the first 5 years. He left Pixar in 1991, like basically before they started blowing up. But he does have that like founder of Pixar kind of thing, which I was surprised. John Lasseter, our next name, is not a co-founder. He was there at the beginning, but he is not a like founder of Pixar. He was just kind of like in the animation team. He is the writer-director of Luxo Jr., Red's Dream, Tin Toy, and Knick Knack. By the time Geri's Game came around, he was busy again with Toy Story, so that one will go to our next name. He was a Pixar animator, and as part of the deal that made Pixar a Disney subsidiary in 2006, would eventually become the chief creative officer for the company. I think by that time in 2006, I think I saw he was basically like already like executive vice president of animation or something like that. He was already like a bigwig in the company, but he was really in those early days, he was like the head of the 4-man animation team, but co-founders would be like the Alvy Ray Smith and a couple other names that were basically like the money. Obviously Steve Jobs being one of the biggest names of the early Pixar.
Might have heard of him.
Yeah. In 2017, 2018, there were reports of a history of alleged sexual misconduct that pushed John Lasseter out of the company. Aside from that, he was the writer-director on projects like Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Cars, and Cars 2. And then an executive for many, many years outside of that. And then lastly, I believe it's Jan Pinkava,
Probably makes sense.
He is Czech. I did see that, so I think Jan's probably the
It
appropriate
should
one
be
there.
on then, yeah.
That is our writer director for Geri's Game. He was also this was a fascinating little tidbit I found from Wikipedia. He was the original director of Ratatouille before Brad Bird took over, and he is still credited
that is
as the
interesting.
original story behind Ratatouille. But seemingly Ratatouille is, I think, notably one of the first like troubled developments that the Pixar kind of ran into. So they seem to have a parting of the ways midway through Ratatouille. He was replaced in 2005 by Brad Bird coming onto the project and taking over. So yeah, that's our roll call. That's our who's who of this. So we're going to go through kind of one by one here with some trivia, and then we'll talk about our impressions on each one. And so, yeah, starting out with The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. Some trivia on this. As I alluded to earlier, the film premiered July 25th, 1984 in Minneapolis at the annual SIGGRAPH concert.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, though 2 shots or about 6 seconds of the film were incomplete and made of wireframe renders, so-called pencil test footage over the completed backgrounds. Final rendering of the film was released a month later on August 17th at Toronto's International Animation Festival. The film was also showcased at DigiCon 85. And I did pull in here, in case people are curious, what SIGGRAPH is an abbreviation for. It is the Special Interest Group on Computer Graphics and Interactive Techniques. It is an annual conference on CG, computer graphics, that has been going since 1974 and continues to this day. There's also like a separate like Asian offshoot that happens overseas as well. The short film was named as a tribute to 1981's My Dinner with Andre. And also, as we alluded to earlier, this is technically not a Pixar standalone project because, as the credits of this will show you right up front, this was a project from the Graphics Group, which was a division of Lucasfilm Computer at the time. Basically, like their computer animation part that would then effectively, I think from the trivia I was seeing and reading about kind of like the origins of Pixar, effectively around 1986 is when Lucas is going through his divorce, and basically like Steve Jobs kind of pays $5 million, I think, to spin off this department and basically like buy the animation department out of Lucasfilm and make it its own standalone entity. And that's how Pixar was formed, seemingly as like a getting George some like funds to help cover divorce stuff, I guess. I don't know. Or just so he could focus on other things. But yeah, that's so that is the trivia here for Andre and Wally B. What did you think of this one, Logan?
Let me double check before I say this definitively, but I think it is the one that I probably clicked with the least. I think it's one that I enjoyed the least. But as you said, it's also one that is part of like a subgroup of like a computer division of like a larger, like it's like a whole bunch of like layers to it, right?
Yeah.
And it is their kind of first crack at the bat. I think there's still the sparks of Pixar even here. And some of the charm that we'll kind of see blossom, I think, really in the next one we'll talk about. But I think it's still shown there. I think it's still here. I love the fact that it's named after My Dinner with Andre. It's a really clever like reference that it's doing. And yeah, I mean, I think I find it really interesting that they premiered it with like 6 seconds of footage missing. Like, and the fact that it's only like a month early, and it's like, well, that's weird that you wouldn't just like wait a month.
Well, it's that was when the film festival was happening, so they basically like they were like, we gotta, if we don't get it out now, it's gonna have to wait a year to be, because I think it did win like the award at that festival.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. And him's like, yeah, computer technology. That's a thing too. Like, you said this at the beginning of the episode, but like, it might be easy to take for granted the fact that some of these look a little rough, although some of them I think look very good still. But like it's also that thing of like, when Toy Story came out, that like blew the roof off of what like people thought could be done in like this kind of animation style. And this is what 11 years before Toy Story happened. And so like it is still like in some ways like it's crazy future tech, even if it is just like a couple minutes long.
Mm-hmm. In the timeline of like just to put it in the context of things, you had Tron came out a couple years prior to this, and then like what was happening in animation around this time was Disney The Black Cauldron came out like in 1985. They came out a year later. So like this is well before you would start seeing any kind of, I mean, like Toy Story is going to be the first full-length CG film 10 years, 11 years after this. So this is like very, very like basically like test footage kind of stuff for what would be the next, now 30 years of animation styles.
1984 would have been what, the same year that the original Mario Brothers was released as well, right? Like to kind of give like
the video game, over
let's give like a date of like basically what we consider the dawn of modern video games happened the same year this came out, to kind of give it some credence of like how kind of ahead of its time it was. When you look at like what video games is doing or what movies were doing in terms of animated space, and then this is only a few minutes long, it's only test footage like you said, but it still is just like it is sort of like they had something a decade early.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, I'm very much in agreement with you in terms of like this is a very basic bare bone. Like there's barely a story here. It's basically like a 1 minute joke.
Right.
And like there's also weird elements that I caught like on a rewatch. Like I heard part of it the first time I was watching it, but on a rewatch in particular, I was like, the audio that they're using for this is basically just like recycled Donald Duck audio and Goofy audio. Like anytime Andre is like is responding to the bee, it's basically like Donald Duck quacking and kind of like kind of stuff. And then when he gets stung, you hear basically the Goofy as he gets like shot off screen. And it's like, and that's basically what this is. It's a bee comes, a guy runs away, the bee stings him, and then the guy throws his hat back at the bee, and that's it.
It's a Roadrunner sketch kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
It's very much, and I saw some of that. Like a couple of these early ones were very like influenced by Looney Tunes, kind of like let's do a Looney Tunes thing, but in a computer. Let's make it completely out of a computer,
which is a natural thing to pull from, considering how influential and popular Looney Tunes is.
That's there's my note there. Looney Tunes vibes. Otherwise, incredibly simple premise compared to what would come down the line. And it was also just weird seeing like, because I don't think prior to this, or if I did, I'd certainly forgotten it. I didn't know that Pixar had a lineage starting in Lucasfilm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think I had like I knew Steve Jobs was linked, so like I probably just always like associated with like, oh, they probably were a spinoff of Apple, not realizing that was like when Pixar is founded, Steve Jobs is on the outs of Apple, and like it would be a few years before he would make his way back to Apple. So like this was basically what Steve Jobs was doing as a side thing when he got kicked out of his own company.
I guess it also makes it to like most people aren't like as big like George Lucas Star Wars freaks as I am too, right? So like read enough books on him, and like this area of like this like 10-year period of George Lucas from like 84 to like 94, right? Like kind of in between the two trilogies is like really interesting of like just like what did this dude do who made the biggest thing ever who just like went off into the woods for 10 years basically, and like it's really fascinating.
So next up we have Luxo Jr. Trivia wise, this would be the first short film by Pixar proper following the company's 1986 founding as a standalone entity. Was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film.
Deservedly.
It lost to a Belgian animated short film titled A Greek Tragedy. So shout out to that guy. There are those people that have like this one up of like, we beat Pixar. It was the first ever CGI film nominated for an Academy Award. because anything else was still traditional animation at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Luxo Jr. The lamp would go on to be featured in the Pixar logo.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's also weird seeing like the original Pixar logo.
Yeah, I had the
In
same
these
thought.
ones
Yeah.
that's just like the square with like a couple little colored circles at the bottom. It's like, yeah. And as we've touched on across many of our Pixar themed That D Plus shows, the lamp and the ball have been featured as Easter eggs across numerous Pixar projects. Most notably with, as we touched on last week, Luxo Jr. is seen as a constellation when Buzz is going out and flying out into space. So yeah, Luxo Jr. My notes here are basically it's a step up in every way. It does a great job like introducing a relationship between
Yeah.
these two lamps. And like obviously it's building off of like tropes of like a parent and a child kind of
Yeah.
simple stuff, but like they have character, they have like emotion in just
Yeah.
how they're presented. There's action, there's comedy, and there's just a sense of play to it
Yeah.
that just makes that one so much more of like a joyous like, oh, this makes sense for where Pixar is going to go. That first one's like, oh, that's a rough tech demo.
Yeah.
That's like an
That's a great
N64
way to put
era
it. It
of
is a
something.
tech demo. Yeah. Yeah. I love Luxo Jr. It's actually one of my favorite Pixar shorts that we're going to kind of run through here.
Mm-hmm.
It's also one that I remember seeing in a theater, right? Like I think it's Toy Story 2 it premiered with, that they like put it with. And so like I remember watching this in the theater, seeing this, and like that was my first exposure to like this short and like the lamp and the ball and like all that kind of stuff. And so like I really like this short. It is like one of my earliest Pixar movies because obviously Toy Story 2 would have been what, like 99 probably. So I'd have been like 7 years old when this came out for me. And so like I really love it. I think it is a perfect first short, right? And I love that they've like held on to so much of like the iconography of this one with like the Lexo ball and Lexo Junior lamp. And like so much of this like brought me back to, I feel like, the 90s and early 2000s of like the lamp hopping across the screen and like hopping up and down and like smashing the eye to like in the old Pixar logo, and like everything in it was just like, this is great. And yeah, like the level of, for lack of a better word, like the level of like humanity they're able to give these two lamps is like really a testament, I think, to the skill of the artist at Pixar, and like such a great look into what their future would be with stories that involve people or not people, and the kind of depth and soul they're able to give them. It's like a really great 2-minute short, even by like 2020 standards.
Yeah, and I know some of them. I believe John Lasseter in particular has like a history because I believe this would have been after the Brave Little Toaster, so
Ooh.
which is one of like the notable animated films of my youth, and it is a toaster and a lamp and a
Yeah.
a warm blanket.
Oh, it's a great
kind of
movie.
thing.
I've watched it many times.
So it is like, and very much like the lamp from Brave Little Toaster. It almost has a lineage into Luxo Jr. here, and so he had like this history or this practice of like turning that inanimate object into a thing that obviously would go on to be a feature of many Pixar films. And yes,
Brave Little Toaster was 1987.
okay, okay. So these were right around the same time. Interesting. Right? Is that the time frame I said?
Brave Little Toaster to
Yeah.
the Rescue, which is a movie I've seen even more. It came out a decade after Brave Little Toaster, 97.
Yeah. Luxo Jr. 86, Brave Little Toaster 87. Similarly, what was I going to say? Nope, it has escaped me. Oh well. But yes, lots of good stuff there in Luxo Jr. And very much a good indication of what would be to come from that talent. Next up, we have Red's Dream, which is a short. Some trivia on this. The short was designed to demonstrate new technical innovations in imagery. Short was created by employing the company's own Pixar image computer, but the computer's memory limitations led the animation group to abandon it for future projects. So, typical stuff there. Eben's Bikes, the storefront that we have in here, is named for the animator and technical director Eben Osby. Shortly following the completion of Red's Dream, animators Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, two of Walt Disney's legendary original 9 animators, known as the 9 Old Men, who I did the Frank and Ollie documentary a couple months back as that D+ show. They visited Lasseter at Pixar and watched a screening. Frank Thomas was evidently freed of his former doubts about computer animation. He had expressed in a 1984 essay in which he argued computer animation could never produce anything as meaningful as its hand-drawn predecessor. But after watching the film, he shook Lasseter's hand and stated meaningfully to him, "John, you did it." So, fun little passing of the torch there. Yeah. That would then also become full circle because Frank and Ollie advised on many of Pixar's early stuff, and most notably are featured as a cameo in The Incredibles at the end of the film. They're the 2 old men that are like, yeah, old school, haha, old school. So fun little passing of the torch there from Frank and Ollie to Lasseter and Pixar. So what'd you think of Red's Dream here?
I didn't like it as much as Luxo Jr.
Mm-hmm.
I found it's weirdly I don't know, its ending is weirdly dark, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? It's sort of a bummer, which I found really sort of jarring for a Pixar short. But I think it is really silly. It's sort of interesting to see the pieces kind of slowly coming together for a full-length movie in some of these shorts. And I think there's obviously a lot more DNA in Luxo Jr. than there is here. But, I like it. This almost feels a little bit to me like A Bug's Life following up Toy Story in terms of, the shorts impacts as well in terms of, Luxo Jr. to then this. But I like it. It's definitely better than, Andre and Wally B. Mm-hmm. If not quite at the same heights as Luxo Jr. or kind of the 2 or 3 that are going to follow it.
Yeah. I remember the thing I was going to chime in on earlier. I just was going to confirm that, yes, Luxo Jr. did originally debut in theaters alongside Toy Story 2.
Thank you.
And Red's Dream here did not ever debut in theaters alongside anything.
I've never seen this
It
before.
was first seen in the Pixar Short Films Collection, Volume 1.
Yeah.
And yeah, it definitely has that darker, more melancholy tone to it. Of this I like the way it's playing with atmosphere, with the jazz noir kind of vibe. Rainy day, we go into the bike shop and we see this sad little unicycle 50% off in the corner. It's even that's a very macabre joke, I guess, in the in the stylings of it. And then we get to see Red's Dream there, and it's fascinating because it's they're these early years of trying to animate humanoid characters are horrifying, as is the clown here and as is the baby in our next one. But the animation for the unicycle itself has very much the same kind of vibes as the Luxo Jr. lamp. It has a character to it, and the way they use the bike seat to be the head of the of him, and he can hang his head and be sad. He's using his pedals as kind of the hands to juggle and stuff like that. There's a fun creativity there that makes it is a short of 2 worlds. It's they nail that stuff, and then the clown's there, and it's oh, this does not look good. Don't do this. But they probably realize it's not good, and so they lean into the comedy of it, and you have that moment where he just keeps, floating and flying while he's, doing the animation of riding the unicycle, but the unicycle's clearly doing its own thing, and then he just does the Roadrunner fall, or Wile E. Coyote fall rather. So yeah, very very rough early days, but they lean into like the storytelling nature of it instead, and then yeah, we get kind of this like somber ending of him riding
Coming
back
to,
into the
right.
corner. Like
Yeah.
he's so joyous in his dream, and then back over to the corner to hide his shame. It's yeah, it's an interesting like darker tone for a Pixar thing.
Yeah.
That we don't see them flex that too often, in purely like sadness. Like obviously, like you get the first 10 minutes of Up or something, it's like, oh, that's sad, but you know that the movie's going to continue on from there. So yeah, interesting little one, and yeah, this was probably one of the first times I'd seen it. So next up we have the Tin Toy. Trivia on this one: it won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film. And the success of Tin Toy gained the attention from then Disney CEO Michael Eisner, and the Walt Disney Studios chairman at the time, Jeffrey Katzenberg. They approached Pixar to produce a computer animated film. In the early 1990s, Pixar began to make arrangements with Disney to produce the first computer animated film. Project went through, but considering the abrupt transition from shorts to feature, a few minutes to an hour and a half, Pixar set out to create a special half hour to see if they could manage a production that was similar to that of an actual film. So they're basically going to turn Tin Toy into a half hour special. Driven by the victory at the Oscars that year, a sequel called A Tin Toy Christmas was originally planned as a half-hour-long television special to be used to convince film studios that Pixar could do a full feature film. The idea was brought to the table, and initial talks with Disney for Toy Story began. Basic idea was that Tinny was going to be a set of toy players who were not successful and remained unsold for years. Separated from other components, Tinny ends up by mistake in a toy shop of our age, where he meets several characters, including a soft pink bear named Lotso, who would come back into play, of course, many years later. The project, however, was abandoned because the television network that would have produced it could not afford the fees required. According to director Pete Docter, or Pixar director Pete Docter, special would have required the sum of 18 times higher than the allowed budget.
Yeah, that would do it.
So Disney was uninterested in the concept and urged Pixar to produce a feature, basically go straight to feature that we can make money off of, as opposed to a half-hour TV special. Of course, that would go on to become a Toy Story, and the character of Lotso would be adapted into the third installment of the Toy Story series. Tinny himself makes a cameo in Toy Story 4, appearing when Woody and Bo Peep enter the pinball machine to meet Duke Kaboom. So, yeah, Tin Toy. What'd you think about this one, Logan?
I mean, it's definitely Toy Story,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of Toy Story in this short. It's so interesting too because you don't get deliberately so. I would assume you don't get a lot of like the actual people in Toy Story, like 6 years down the line, kind of thing. It's a lot of like their feet and legs and that kind of thing. And here you get a straight up baby. You see, it's like a central element of it, and it is just like, oh, okay, interesting. Like the way the baby moves is sort of like a toy, and that is sort of interesting. It is definitely more playful. I think again, it kind of leans back into Luxo Jr. vibe, and I think that I really liked how they incorporated the movements for the toy into the chase scene, right? Like him like spinning around because that's how that toy would work, right? And then kind of going off in a new direction, or like, you know, anytime he moves, he starts clapping and like the drum set goes. Like it's a really smart design for that character and how they utilize it in this, 5-minute short, but one that you see kind of build to fruition with how the characters move and interact and play and speak in Toy Story and Toy Story 2 and 3 and 4.
Yeah. It's weirdly got these elements of Big Baby from Toy Story 3,
Yeah.
while also like the big baby is basically Sid,
Yeah,
with all the
just trying
other
to just
toys just
smash
straight up
everything.
hidden under the couch. Um, and yeah, it's also fascinating because like I'd seen this one before a couple times,
Yeah,
and
same.
then recently when I watched that Beyond Lightyear behind the scenes thing, they kind of talked about like the lead up to and like early test footage and stuff for Toy Story. The original premise wasn't Woody the cowboy and Buzz Lightyear the astronaut. It was Tinny the tin toy and
Hmm.
like as the new toy, and like a ventriloquist dummy as like the Woody kind of character. And
Hmm.
they showed like some test footage of that, and it's like fascinating to see like those early ideas and concepts, and then how that would be
Right.
kind of twisted around
Get
and
refined.
turned
Right. Yeah.
into proper Toy Story. But yeah, like it is very much like whenever I go back and see this, I'm like, Nightmare Baby, no, like
Yeah.
please,
Yeah.
um, uh, but good on them for trying it, and also
Yeah.
like to their credit, like there is a like the very early on, the baby like puts something in their mouth, and then like has just a
The goop.
tool, yeah,
Yeah.
a pool of drool that
Yeah.
just kind of like goes. It's like they definitely knew what they were doing with it. It just is like not good looking, but it's also from that era where it was like that was looking great at the time. Yeah, it looks like a baby who's actually 150 years old somehow, but again, for like what they would have had at the time, um that like going that realistic look, because like when you contrast it against the animation and the like Tinny has a lot of expression, and he has a face that that is reactive and responding to things, and his eyes are moving around, and he kind of has like he is animated in an interesting style, and the baby is very much like here's the realism that we're going to go with. And obviously, when you go back and watch those like the original Toy Story, like now it's like, yeah, Andy doesn't look great, the mom doesn't look great, the baby doesn't look great,
Mhm.
but they that's why they didn't focus on them. They're there for the purpose of the plot and the story, but like the attention that they put into it is the animation of the toys. And this is very much like a, yep, here's the proof of concept for what would become that idea.
Yeah.
um yeah. Up next we have Knick Knack.
Mhm.
This is the one I
Mhm.
actually think
Mhm.
of. You mentioned earlier, as like Luxo, or not Luxo, Red's Dream being the like A Bug's Life to the Luxo Jr. Toy Story. I think this is the A Bug's Life to
Hmm.
Tin Toys A Toy Story, because this one very much is like a
Interesting.
like, oh, it's there, it's not bad, but
Oh, we're
um
gonna disagree on this one. It's gonna be
okay.
great.
Um, the trivia on this one: the singer Bobby McFerrin created the musical soundtrack and a cappella vocal jazz track while he improvised. That's Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy. Fame, of course.
Mhm.
While he improvised while watching a rough cut of the film. As the rough cut ended, the placeholder credits read blah 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 blah. So he sang those words, and it remained in the film score. And if you watch with like the
It's very
subtitles,
good.
it says blah 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 blah. McFerrin did the score for free out of a belief that the film was cool to be involved with. It was one of the last pieces of animation that Lasseter would animate personally during Pixar's years as an independent company, and in 2001, Terry Gilliam selected it as one of the 10 best animated films of all time. So I thought that was an interesting little. That is one of the probably the most trivia things, trivia wise, of this. That's just like oh, that's a cool little thing. So yeah, what did you think of Knick Knack?
This is my favorite of all of them. I
Oh,
love Knick Knack.
wow, okay.
I've loved Knick Knack for years. It's been one of my favorite Pixar shorts that they've ever done. Um, I I just think it is so funny, and I think the fact that it's just like got such a charm to it, and I love the usage of music throughout it. Just kind of like that soft music in the background, and it makes so much sense that it's the guy who did "Don't Worry, Be Happy." Like it fits immediately with that vibe, and I like the minute I've seen this short probably no exaggeration, probably like 2 dozen times. Like I've seen this short a lot, and every time I do, I just like have a smile on my face and laugh. And like it's super simple. But I think like everything it sets out to do, it does really well. And it's like 3 or 4 minutes long. And yeah, I just love the vibe and energy and charm of this one in particular. Like we'll obviously get to Geri's Game in a second, and you know that is obviously a leap forward from anything we've covered yet. But there was just something I think, yeah, really charming in its simplicity and like sense of humor to Knick Knack.
Yeah, for me, this one, like, again, I don't think it's bad by any means. It just doesn't
Sure.
like it. It feels like a one note joke.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, continuing on, kind of like what we talked about with like Andre and Wally B earlier. It is. It is the most Wile E. Coyote or Daffy Duck of these. Like it
100%.
like the snowman there is just, increasingly like frustrated and trying to get to the girl, and it just go it stops short of having like the tongue drop out of his mouth and like the eyes go ooga ooga, alongside all of the weird little other sunny knickknacks that are wearing their sunglasses and stuff like that. So yeah, for me it's just like a okay, like I get the premise, I get where this is going, like immediately, and even like when he falls the snow globe off the edge and he makes his escape, exactly how that's going to end when the snow globe is going to still fall on him and put him right back in there. So yeah, not bad. It's just like it is a it's a Looney Tunes cartoon when I'm looking for Pixar in their the highs of Pixar that we've had since then. Because yeah, this originally released alongside Finding Nemo theatrically, but obviously had been like sitting there in their back pocket for many years before that, since this would be the last one prior to Toy Story. So yeah, like not bad, and the especially like first time around I was kind of like I was vibing a little bit to the song, the music of it or whatever, and then seeing like Bobby McFerrin in the credits and being like, oh yeah, no, that's totally him, that totally makes sense. And then like watching it a second time, it was just much more apparent as I had him in my mind, and I was just paying much more attention to his vocal stylings. I think also probably because I'd already put in that trivia bit of like he just kind of improvised that alongside the thing.
Blah 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 blah
yeah.
blah. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. Then yes, our last one for today, Geri's Game, which also much like its predecessor Tin Toy, Knick Knack did not win the best animated short film. I don't even know if it was nominated. I don't know if it had been entered for it. I didn't see anything to that effect in the trivia, I think.
On Wikipedia, it's listed as winning the Academy Award for Best Animated Short.
For Knick Knack?
Oh, for Knick Knack, no. I'm sorry, I was talking to Geri's Game.
Yeah,
I had already gone ahead.
Sorry, yes. Geri, yes. That's I was circling back. Geri's Game won, Tin Toy won, Knick Knack, the one in between those, did not.
Yes.
So yeah. And I don't think it was like it also doesn't have like I'm looking at like the list of Pixar shorts Wikipedia page, and it doesn't have like nominated or won or shortlist or anything. It's just like blank. So it's entirely possible they just didn't submit it. It probably went to and maybe won a SIGGRAPH award or something, and then just they did nothing else with it. Actually, I can see. Let's see if it has. Do we have any? Yeah, it doesn't have any. I don't see any award accolades on that one. But Geri's Game, the last of our bunch today, did win the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film. It was Pixar's first original short film since 1989, when Knick Knack had been released. It was directed and written by Jan Pinkava, who joined the studio in 1993 specifically to work on their TV commercials, while other directors and writers were preoccupied with the production of Toy Story. Geri's
I heard of it.
voice, the vocal intonations that we get from him, came from Pixar writer Bob Peterson, who also is known for the screenplay for Finding Nemo. He was the co-writer and co-director of Up. He did the story for The Good Dinosaur and the screenplay for Cars 3. And you probably know him as the voice of Roz in Monsters, Inc., as well as Doug and Alpha in Up.
Oh,
So, yep, same voice there as Geri.
that is actually an interesting. Yeah.
And of course, Geri's character model would also appear in Toy Story 2 as the cleaner, touching up Woody and painting over that lovely Andy writing. So yes, Geri's game. I mean, for me here, it is the best of the bunch for me.
Right.
Like, I think it is obviously from a technical perspective, it is doing the most. It is
The decade gap helped
yes,
kind of
yeah.
refine, right?
The like, character animation of a human looks, like a stylized animated human as opposed to a nightmare baby. And he like just in both versions of Geri that he's playing, he just has such joy and fun and animation to him and expression. And so yeah, it's just such a fun little story that they do here of, a guy playing chess with himself and coming up with his like wild little farce as he fakes a heart attack against himself.
The punchline stinger of like what they're playing for is also really good of the teeth. Like it's such a great, and then like the slow camera zoom is like such a great little bit. Like Geri's game is another one that I remember seeing in the theater, like for whatever movie it came out with, and
this one came out alongside A Bug's Life.
A Bug's Life, right? And so it's just charming, right? Like, isn't it? Like this would be probably my like this or Luxo Jr would be my pick for my second favorite one, and it is such fun, right? Like I could have spent like 5 more minutes with Geri. I feel like he's such a like lively, dynamic personality, and I love how different the two versions of him are, and how like aggressive one is, and how kind of like skittish but ultimately like clever the other one is. And like the slow build of like him like slowly walking across the table to like sit down and then like sprint back and then like slowly walk back, and like the way that it plays with the cuts back and forth increasingly just make me think they're just two guys there. Like,
yeah,
it's a really well edited short.
Yeah, as I was gonna say, he never sprints back. He's like, he slowly walks over to play the black pieces, and then he slowly walks back over to play the white, and then from then on they just do like rapid cuts to like eliminate all of that stuff and make it much more like a rapid fire game between these guys. Like they cut out all of that
blur
dead
the
air
lines of reality, right? Yeah.
and even in that, they're like fun little moments, like when the one playing the white pieces does fall, and like grabs on the table, then falls and drops, and it cuts back to the guy playing the black pieces and like looking over, like the king is still like shaking as if like it had just been dropped. So like in the timing of it, you have to imagine realistically he sat back down, kind of like flicked it to make it, and then we see that shot, in order to like the like reality of it makes it even funnier that he's doing this fun pantomime thing just for himself, just to just as a fun little goof.
I also like the bit of the like one who's playing the black pieces like checking his pulse too.
Yeah, wait, am I did too?
Yeah, and like checking his heart is a great bit.
Yeah, and then they have like it's almost a fake out, as you said. It like ultimately it's like they're playing for the dentures, but like there's that moment where like one of them, it seems like, is going to make a handshake kind of thing. And you're like, well, how are they going to do this? And then they don't, and they just, he plops down the dentures like, and yeah, it's just like such a fun, like ultimately it is simple like a lot of these other things, but it is. Mm-hmm. So because it is simple in like premise, they really just execute on it like as best they can
and have so much fun with it.
And it's also especially like on a rewatch, and after having the like, oh, this guy was the original kind of like person behind Ratatouille, like the fact that there's like this little jaunty French kind of like tune all throughout
Right.
Geri's game is like, oh, it like, yep, I can totally see that being the Ratatouille guy.
Ratatouille music.
So yeah, this one is again much like the those indie games that just focus on like one thing and do that one thing really really well. This is very much in that vein for me of like they decided to make a one man chess game and they made one of the most entertaining one man chess games ever.
Ever.
So yeah, that's Geri's game. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here, Logan?
Geri's game is great, right? I think it also sort of marks. I was just looking at the list of Pixar shorts. I think I also like the fact that we did these 6 because it also kind of marks the end of with Geri's game, like of the Pixar shorts, kind of its own era. And then after this is where, like, at least for me, it's like my memories of the shorts get a little shakier for the next few Pixar films until like probably around like maybe Up is one where like I start to kind of be like, all right, like I remember those again. Right. And like it's definitely, I think this is sort of Pixar shorts being really standout and unique. Inside Out's short is really great. And so I'll be curious to see if we do a follow up to this in a few weeks. Like, my memories of those are a lot less strong than they are for these films, where like pretty much all of them but the very first one I had like some sort of memory of. And in some of the cases, like Luxo Jr. or Knick Knack or Geri's game, I've seen many times, and that's just not the case for some of these other ones. So it'll be, kind of an interesting look at those.
Yeah, I think what's potentially the most interesting aspect of that for me is like, as I'm looking through, like I like For the Birds and Boundin' and One Man Band, I immediately have like memories of, or I can like as soon as I see that I can like immediately think about it.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening there is you're making the move from VHS, where those were packed into the VHS tape and played before the thing. So anytime you watch those movies, unless you like actively fast forwarded it, you were watching those shorts.
Only a did.
And then you start moving into the DVD thing, and yeah, they might play beforehand, but they might also just be on the DVD as a special feature. And so you had to like actually seek them out if you wanted to watch them over and over again.
That's a really good point, Trevor. That's actually a really interesting point of like that might be
I think
what it is for my own memories.
Yeah, that's probably what's happening in those eras, because there's also an element of like, yeah, I probably didn't like, while I have distinct memories of One Man Band, I probably didn't watch it a ton because it was attached to Cars, and I didn't really care about like rewatching Cars a lot.
Right. Yeah, we weren't into that.
And same like Lifted, like I have very little, like I'm sure if as soon as I start to see it, I'm sure I would remember it, but like it was attached to Ratatouille, and while I love Ratatouille, I didn't watch Ratatouille a ton.
I don't love Ratatouille, so I definitely have. Yeah. That's a really great point.
But yeah, I think that's where like even like nowadays it's getting even more sparse, because so many of like all of these ones that are just going straight to Disney Plus don't have shorts associated with them, or if they like they've kind of like disconnected them compared to like the last one I remember seeing was going and seeing Onward in theaters right before the pandemic, and it's instead of it being a Pixar short that was playing beforehand, it was a Simpsons short, and being like, this is the new world we live in, where you can see a Simpsons short because they had bought Fox by that point in front of a Pixar movie. Okay. Or like you had infamously before Coco, there was like a 20-minute Frozen short that nobody wanted to see and nobody cared about. And so people were like showing up late because they just wanted to see Coco. So it is like the Pixar shorts brand has morphed into something else, and in particular it is a like,
that's a great point.
They occasionally do dumps on Disney Plus, and it's like, hey, here's 5 new Pixar shorts for you to check out, or like, hey, here's a bunch of Forky shorts after Toy Story 4 and stuff like that. So but yeah, it's like this early era, this very much this like Pixar short films collection one. Let me actually see. I'm pulling up that page to see like what else of these was on that one. So yeah, that one goes up through Lifted, the volume one of the shorts. So it's all of these plus the next 6 or 7. But it is very much like it's definitely a different like flavor of things, just because of probably the time that they ended up being released in.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's dive into the report card. We grade from A+ to F. What do you want to give our Pixar Shorts Volume 1 here, Logan?
Are we giving each individual short a grade?
I mean, you can if you want. I'm just gonna probably do a stack B across the board of these. Like,
if we're doing all of them, together, I would also agree a B. I will say special shout outs to Luxo Jr., Knick Knack, and Geri's Game. All 3 of those I would give an A to.
Yeah, that's fair. Cool. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. Unsurprisingly,
we just talked about them.
If you click any of these, most likely all of your other options are going to be on there, but some other ones not outside of these 6 are effectively the next batch of Pixar shorts. It'd be For the Birds, Bounden, One Man Band, Lifted, Presto, Partly Cloudy, Day and Night, and La Luna. And I will shout out La Luna in particular, because I think we touched on this in our Luca episode. La Luna, created by the same person who would go on to do Luca, and the dad from Luca is very much like the dad character in La Luna. It's just like the same character model, basically, in the way that Geri is basically in Toy Story 2. It's basically the same kind of thing. You watching anything else on Disney Plus for extracurriculars this week, Logan?
I don't think so. I don't think I'm watching anything else on Disney Plus currently.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I sat down, in addition to my usual shtick of just throwing on the latest High School Musical the series episode,
right?
Which is continuing to be really silly. I did watch all of the I Am Groot shorts that came out.
Nice.
5 little, a very fitting companion piece to this. 5 shorts that are basically like 5 minutes in length, a piece, that are basically like little animated Baby Groot shorts. They're not the most easily navigatable pieces of, because like, I mean, much like these, there isn't like a playlist of just do the shorts.
Right.
So you have to like kind of go through one by one. And if you're lucky, they'll all be, in the suggested options and you can just kind of click through. Whereas like with Baymax, that little short series that came out last month or a couple months ago, it was like Baymax is the series and you can watch one of the 6 episodes of the Baymax series or something like that. This is it's not the I Am Groot series, it is 5 I Am Groot shorts. So you basically just have to go and like find and watch each one. And like it would have been way easier to just do like either a play all option or give me the like I Am Groot category and plop through all them. They're fine. They're much like a lot of these, like a one joke premise, but they're Groot being cute in baby form.
We love it.
The first one you get is, which ended up being, because of that like weirdness, it ended up being the last one I watched because it was the last one I found. But the first episode, or the first one of them, is effectively Baby Groot's first steps or something like that. And it's taking the Baby Groot from the end of the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, who is still in the pot, and he gets like shoved aside for a bonsai tree, and basically in his like anger and rage, he breaks out of his pot and takes his first little baby steps and becomes the Baby Groot that you get at the beginning of Guardians 2. And then all the other ones are basically just Guardians 2 Baby Groot. But yeah, fun little things.
As a non sequitur, where is Groot at in the current MCU timeline? Is he still teenage Groot?
Yeah, I believe so. Like teen Groot in the aftermath of Endgame.
That's what I was trying to think. Right?
And
That's what,
like well yeah he's there in Thor Love and Thunder too, beginning of Thor Love and
Oh,
Thunder
okay.
with the Guardians. So yeah, he's still Teen Groot. I think the San Diego Comic-Con footage kind of teases that maybe he's, older, more angsty Teen Groot
In
in
Guardians
Guardians
3.
3. But yeah, he's basically still in that
It
era.
is sort of amazing that they did commit to Groot not being Groot, right, for most of the MC run that he will probably inevitably be in. Because after Guardians 3, you're probably not going to get that much more Groot. And so, like, it is interesting that they stuck with that, right? Because it very easily could have been, like, a funny joke at the end of Guardians 1. And then by Guardians 2, he's, like, big game. They kept him slowly growing the entire time. And I do appreciate that.
Yep. But yeah, those are the things I've been watching. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but it's on my like docket to sit down and watch. Is the Lego Star Wars Summer Vacation short, a la the holiday special from a couple years ago and last
Might
year's
be
Terrifying
a
Tales.
D+ show coming up, so stay tuned.
It's definitely like on my radar as like let's do a D+ of that. I haven't gotten back to the Light and Magic series, but it's also something I want to go back to and continue visiting. So yeah, that's
I will.
Yep.
Excuse me. I will give a shout out to the fact that I officially finished my rewatch of Cougar Town. Not the ID Plus show, but 2 years ago, right when the pandemic first happened, I watched Cougar Town for the very first time in my entire life. And to my surprise, I like really loved it. It is like the perfect summer TV show of just like friends hanging out, drinking wine, and just like having a great time. And I really loved it, and it was like perfect for that. And so now every summer I just rewatch the entire show. So we just finished watching all 6 seasons, literally like last week. So I will celebrate that.
There you go.
There are 4 great seasons in that show, and the last 2 are a little bit rougher, but it's great. It's a great time nonetheless.
Fair. I outside of Disney Plus, I watched the first few episodes. I think one more has come out since then, but I watched the first few episodes of Harley Quinn season 3 over on HBO Max. Nice. I've continuing fun vibes there. So
just watched the first 2 episodes of Only Murders in the Building. I really like it a lot.
Yeah. I saw The Orville is now on. It made the jump from Hulu over to Disney Plus. So maybe I'll finally sit down and check that out. I know my dad's been a big fan of that one, so I'll have to let him know. Hey, you have my Disney Plus account, so now if you want to watch it there, you can go and watch it there.
Check it out.
Yeah. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you for joining me as we discussed these Pixar shorts, Logan. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Loggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
I will give a shout out to Cameron's Let's Play of Friday Night Dying Lights. We are in the home stretch. Extra shout out to Cameron because he put in this week's episode early.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we probably only have 4 or 5 I had to guesstimate left.
I think
that seems about right in the math.
I think this one was episode 30 or 28. I think that he gave me. I'm pulling it up now.
Do we know how many total there are?
There are, I believe, 34. I think is the last episode.
So there's
5
or 6, last 5 or 6 episodes. Okay, great. So yeah, stay tuned for that. We're running down for his Dying Light 2 journey. And so give Cameron all the love and shout out for that, and go check it out.
Yeah. I agree. Shout out to that. You can also you follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I will give a shout out to this week's Let's Plays that were let's see. Tuesday was what was Tuesday? It was a game that came out last week. No, it wasn't a game that came out last week. For Tuesday's Let's Play, I did the demo of Thirsty Suitors.
That's what I thought. Yeah, okay.
Which is the one of the next games coming out from Annapurna by the Outer Loop Games team, who previously did Falcon Age. And then for the Thursday Let's Play, I did 2 Point Campus, which is a new game that's out on Xbox Game Pass as well as other systems and stuff. But yeah, it is basically a simulator game where you're building a college campus, and having kids learn funny classes and stuff like that. So yeah, go check those out. youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where you can find all of our Let's Plays, including the Cameron Friday Night Dying Light series as it winds its way down. Follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.